Hi, thank you for waiting for the last presentation of the day. I promise you it was worth it. My name is Vanessa Woolley. To my right is Rosalia Otaduy-Ramirez. We're both environmental engineers. Rounding us out is Tao Cai, a material science engineer. And we are Team Aquaducts, water quality improvement for an urban world. Oh, sorry. So this is a picture of the Huron River. As you can see, it flows through many different communities. And so we came into this with the goal of improving water quality of the Huron River. Talking to stakeholders, we realized this was a more complicated and widespread issue than we had ever imagined, with many different sources. We decided to focus on sewage overflows, which is the phenomena of water being released either intentionally or unintentionally, untreated into the river. So this is sewage and anything coming from homes and other sources. Over 1 million gallons has been spilled in the past 4 years in Ann Arbor alone. So continuing to speak with our stakeholders, livery workers think the water is contaminated because they frequently have to shut down the business. Rowers don't want to be on the water if it isn't clean because they're on it so often, and it inhibits other recreational activities like fishing, swimming, and anything else that happens on the river. There's also concerns from experts about long-term water quality, and fish experts are concerned about the river biome, and other experts as well, so people who are worried about birds, turtles, everything you like to see when you go to a river. There's also concerns about algal blooms as these nutrients flow into the river and get stagnated and cause big blooms and dead zones. Moving on to a more community focused, parents wouldn't let their kids swim in this river because of concerns about safety. And downstream communities such as Ypsilanti distrust in the safety of the water, and they feel like they're being gypped by Ann Arbor, who is a high socioeconomic class, moving it on to the lower socioeconomic class in Ypsilanti. It seems like Ann Arbor is making a problem for them. As well as looking at this, on the right is the Cascades in Ann Arbor, so it shows recreation. On the left is the the wastewater treatment plant in Ann Arbor. As you can see, there is a road above and a river below. So it is landlocked and I guess riverlocked as well. So any changes they make to this need to either fit or they have to demolish something which will temporarily decrease their ability to treat the water. So all of Ann Arbor's sewage and a fraction of stormwater goes to this plant, which was built in 1935 by federal funds. And with increased urbanization and population, there's an increased daily inflow of this plant that it's very hard for municipalities to upkeep because they have a lot less funding than the federal government. As well as the fraction of stormwater is increasing into this plant due to climate change causing increased storms, both intensity and frequency. As well as this being a huge problem for the wastewater treatment plant, it has to release this water, otherwise it could destroy the whole facility. So when these happen, it releases nutrients and E. coli into the water. E. coli is a huge disease-causing agent, and nutrients such as phosphorus and nitrogen cause algal blooms and disrupt the native biota. So we need a small solution for a huge problem.
Thank you, and I'll be talking about our solution. So our solution is called the Quality Water and Contamination Control Device, or QUAC for short. And the idea is that it's an end-of-pipe solution. So you attach it to the end of the wastewater treatment plant just before water enters the river, and it processes any contaminated water that happens to get through. And so this is our initial design, and we have a more updated design shown here. On the left is a CAD model of our design, and on the right is a flow model. And so you can see an arrow showing the direction that water flows from left to right. And I'll be going through our device and how it treats the water step by step. So first, we have a solid filter. This removes any solid debris that happens to get through. And there's a container at the bottom to catch any of that solid waste that's easy to remove and clean from easy maintenance. Then this black portion is a activated carbon filter, which removes a large majority of the nutrients and even heavy metals and other contaminants that might get through. And we have a UV light surrounding that edge of that cylinder, which disinfects and kills any bacteria. And we need to power this UV light. And so we have solar panels and a turbine here. The turbine generates electricity as the water flows through the pipe, and the solar panel generates electricity from the sun. And so this device is completely self-sustainable and self-sustaining and really, really low maintenance. It's really easy to get in and install the device and clean it which is really helpful because the the wastewater treatment plant is super high energy consumption area. And so again, this will just go at the end of the pipe and treat any wastewater that happens to get through. And so why, oh, I'm sorry. And we have to have a source of electricity storage. And so we have a battery to store any electricity generated from the turbine and from the UV light, the solar panels. And so why are we the group to do this? So Vanessa and I, growing up in Ann Arbor, we were always told by our parents, don't swim in the river because it's generally dirty. And the three of us are University of Michigan students and super integrated with our campus. And the Huron River runs right through our campus, and it's central in the Arb. And so it's something that we really want to upkeep and keep clean and healthy for everybody to enjoy. Especially Vanessa and Rosalia are environmental engineering majors, so this is super close to their field. And sorry, the problem hasn't been addressed like this before because generally water is treated before it reaches the end of pipe. But in this specific case of wastewater sewage overflows, contaminated water reaches the end of pipe. And so our solution is the first of this kind to address this problem. And actually, this can be applied to other cities, not just Ann Arbor. So cities like Detroit or Chicago, this solution can also help them with sewage overflow situations, which happen very frequently. And so in terms of next steps, our next step is to do some physical testing after we've run these simulations. And so we are planning to work in a lab to perform some tests on the filters and make sure they work, and also do some flow experiments to make sure flow happens as we expect. Then we'll put all the parts together and test the device as a whole, make sure everything works once it's integrated together. And then we'll do some on-site testing. We have talked closely with the manager of the wastewater treatment plant, and we have figured out ways that we can actually test our device on-site and see if it actually helps them with this problem. And we also want to incorporate a portion of water literacy to our solution. And so we're going to work with local organizations like Blue Conduit, who are really well-versed in the area and have more of this expertise in communication that we don't have, and who can help us inform and educate the public who is generally uninformed like I was about the problem of wastewater in Ann Arbor. And on the bottom left is the framework for socially engaged design, the design process. Currently, we're like in between this develop and realize stage. And so depending on how our experiments go, we might have to move back into this develop stage and continue iterating until we get a solution to work. And so at the top here are our use and sustainability goals that we try to address with our problem. Here's a video of the simulation. It looks like it's going really slowly. I'm sorry about that. But that is the end of our presentation. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll open the floor to any questions.
Thank you for your presentation. That was great, and definitely an important challenge and issue to address. In terms of the design, how did you develop this design? How did you determine that, you know, the elements that you have will address the issue?
Yeah, I can take that one. Do you want to switch to, we have a slide quickly. Let me switch to it. You're good. About our design once more. So this solution is very important to be fast because you have a large volume of water going in. So your usual water treatment plant, like settling, putting in chemicals, waiting takes a long time, but we don't have that time. So we worked on creating a fast acting solution that would address most of the issues. And our two main issues were nutrients and E. coli. So we chose UV as it's a fairly standard but quick way to address the water E. coli and other bacteria in the water, as well as the activated carbon, which is granulated activated carbon, which takes a lot less time to filter, though it can have channeling problems, which we are planning on focusing, which is based upon our filters being stacked. And we also decided that this was something that was important to be not mobile, but small, so that it could fit on the end of pipe and not be a huge solution. Did that answer your question?
It does.
Thank you.
So just another question. Are there multiple filters needed for these plants? How
So
do you envision this?
yeah, so it looks like one solid disc in this drawing, but it is three discs very close together. That way it can go through the quickly, and activated carbon works by having the most surface area, it'll absorb the most it can. So you want them to be thin and have as much contact with the water as possible, which is why we chose to do small, thin layers as opposed to one thick one.
Okay. I'm trying to understand how it works.
Do you want me to explain activated carbon a little bit?
Sure.
Okay, so a good metaphor for activated carbon filters is a sponge. Okay, so a sponge has a lot of pores in it. It's essentially got a bunch of tunnels in there. So there's a very large surface area within this filter. And so when these contaminants in the water pass through the filter, there are intermolecular forces, commonly called van der Waals forces, which attract and remove these contaminants from the water and stick them to the filter, the carbon. And so we chose activated carbon specifically for its large surface area. So we don't need as many filters to treat our large volume of water. Our specific design, we were planning on mixing it with coconut fibers to make it a more sustainable design. Additionally, activated charcoal filters can be regenerated. So the whole point of this was sustainability. And so all of the contaminants can be removed by thermal means and through oxidization. So we can keep reusing our filters throughout the lifetime of the device.
Thank you. That's really good.
How often do the filters last, or for how long?
So with constant use, a activated carbon filter would have to be changed every 6 months. But as these are not happening constantly, they're only in large rainfall events, you would just need to probably replace it every second or third. And we imagine having 2 sets of filters at all time, one in the device and one clean. That way, if you have to replace one of them, the other one can be sent out to be regenerated and then brought back. And you never have to have a worry of not being able to filter your water.
Okay. Can you speak a little bit more about the stakeholder interviews you did? How many people you spoke with, and how you know that this is something that would that would be applicable in the wastewater treatment plants?
Yeah, so we talked to a wide variety of stakeholders, and mostly we talked to experts in the river. And so we talked to the manager of the wastewater treatment plant, the president of the Huron River Watershed Council, and a lot of professors who gave us information about what contaminants were really significant, what sources these contaminants were largely coming from, ways that we can treat it, and like the practicality of our solution and other solutions before it. And so we were kind of able to look at what people have previously done and see that our solution is a lot more practical and cost effective and sustainable than previous solutions.
And then we did talk to the wastewater treatment plant manager several times, and we actually just met with him last week. We pretty much gave him this presentation and said, this is our design. Would this work in your facility? And he was like, yes, this would work in your facility. And I think it would work in other facilities too. And he was giving us examples of other places where this could be implemented. And he seemed very excited about it. So it's definitely something that they're open to at the wastewater treatment plant.
What are the costs associated with developing this filter?
Oh, sorry, the slides went back to the beginning, but we have a slide discussing the costs. And so we mainly have to buy materials and the actual components of the filter. And so this is our predicted cost, which includes the body of the actual device, the filters themselves, the UV lights, battery, the turbine for energy generation, the solar panels, all of this combined is around $850 is what we would predict. And even if it's slightly more than this is significantly cheaper than having to replace any infrastructure, which municipalities don't even have enough funding to do. And so regardless, even if this price was double, it would be way cheaper than having to, when there's a sewage overflow event, having to go in there and do any it would be way cheaper than having to replace all of the existing infrastructure to make up for these sewage overflow events.
As well, on the legal side, the city of Ann Arbor was fined over $40,000 last year due to repeated sewage overflows. So this solution can avoid that in the future.
On that note, have you been able to speak to city officials who have said that they would be willing to, there's room in their budget to put towards prevention and that they would be willing to pay for this?
We were hoping to start with funds from this or grants in order to put this pilot into the wastewater treatment plant, as opposed to having them invest in something that hasn't been tested yet. Though the wastewater treatment plant was open to, we said, would you be willing to pay for something like this? And the manager said, this is a good option for removing this kind of things that we cannot do on site and would be way less than paying a fine again. So they were definitely open, though we should definitely contact some city officials.
I think we probably have time for one last question. Dana or Stacey, if you wanted to jump in with any of the last questions.
So one last question. Obviously, the environmental impact, there's really big problems. Do you have a sense of how much this can filter out or how effective this could be?
So typically carbon filters filter up to 97% of their targeted contaminants, as well as UV being very, very effective, especially in the configuration we have, which would be able to reach almost all of the water in our system. And as well as anything is better than what they have now. So it's going from 100% to like 5 to 10%. But we want to do additional testing to verify our literature results.
I'm sorry, to quickly speak on the effectiveness of UV light. UV light is generally around 99.9% effective in killing bacteria, especially within 6 inches of the UV light. It can kill the bacteria within 10 seconds. And so we're covering the entire inside of our device in this UV light. And our simulation shows that the water flows in a way that it circulates within the device and allows it to reach basically all crevices where this UV light is where it's exposed to UV light. And so from our simulation, it seems like our UV disinfection will be extremely effective in disinfecting the water.
Just one last question. Do you have an idea whether the filter would be different, it would need to be designed differently for different bodies of water? So for the Detroit River or Chicago or other areas, would you need different components?
So all of the internal components would stay the same. I would say the only variations it would have would be the size of our actual device of the cylinder, because other treatment facilities might have larger volumes of water coming in. And so that is the only variable in these devices, I would say.
Thank you.